Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to do something, well, a little different. I want to start with a concept that usually sends people running for the hills. We are going to talk about a rule of life.
Yeah, that is definitely a phrase that instantly puts people on the defensive.
Right. I mean, be honest. When you are listening to this and you hear the word rule, what is the first thing that pops into your head? You probably think of a list of do's and don'ts.
Absolutely. You think of restrictions.
Exactly. You think of a straitjacket for your daily existence. It sounds like a buzzkill.
It's a completely natural reaction.
Mm.
We are conditioned to view rules as things that limit our freedom, not things that enhance it. We think of rules as the walls that keep us in, not the foundation that holds us up.
That's perfectly said. But I was looking through the stack of research you sent over for today, and by the way, this stack is thick, and I started to see this differently. What if a rule wasn't about restriction at all? What if we rebranded it? What if we thought of it as a Q&A session designed to, well, hack human nature?
Hack is the right word for it.
Right. Like, what if it was a blueprint for maximum focus, maximum community, and essentially a user's manual on how not to be a jerk to the people you live with?
That is a very modern way of framing a very ancient text.
Yeah.
But honestly, it is entirely accurate. That is exactly what this is.
So today we are diving deep into the rule of St. Basil, specifically the Regula Bacilli. Now, before you tune out thinking this is just Sunday school history, we need to clarify something. We aren't just reading a generic translation you'd find on a dusty library shelf or a quick internet search.
No, absolutely not. We are working from Anna M. Silva's critical edition. This is the heavy lifting. This is the academic gold standard.
And heavy lifting is the operative phrase here. This isn't just a translation, it is a piece of textual archaeology. I was reading the intro notes you made, and it seems like Silva's is doing something akin to restoring a ruined mosaic.
That's a great analogy.
She is combining a Latin translation by a man named Rufinus of Aquileia from AD 397, modern textual detective work that pits scholars like Zeltzer against Lundstrom, which we will get to because that is a drama in itself, and she cross-references all of that with a Syriac version called Questions of the Brothers.
It sounds like a detective novel waiting to happen. The grape controversy, the lost manuscripts, it is all in there.
It really is, and that's what makes this so cool. It shows that even a text that seems static, something written 1,600 years ago, is actually alive with history and debate. It is not set in stone. It is something we have to uncover.
We certainly are going to uncover it today.
But before we get to the detective story and the manuscript wars, we have a specific mission today. We need to understand the human story behind this document. We need to understand how a 4th century intellectual who was, by all accounts, excessively puffed up with his own rhetoric and ego, got humbled by his big sister, retreated to a gorge in Turkey, and wrote a guide to community living that basically invented the DNA of Western monasticism.
It is a massive legacy. I mean, think about it. If you look at St. Benedict, who is often called the father of Western monasticism, the guy who wrote the rule that governed Europe for 1,000 years, he actually refers to Basil in his own rule. He calls him our Holy Father Basil. You simply do not get the Benedictine tradition or the university system or the way we think about work and study without Basil.
So here is our roadmap for this deep dive. We have a lot of ground to cover. First, the human story, Basil, his sister Macrina, and the formatting of the soul. We need to know who this guy was. Second, the textual puzzle, how we got this text when the original is lost. That is the detective part. Third, the philosophy, why love is an instinct, not just a command. And finally, the killer app of Basil's rule, the argument for community over solitude.
Which leads to one of the most devastating questions in early Christian literature. Whose feet will you wash?
I love that line. It haunts me. It has been stuck in my head all morning. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the man himself, who was Basil before he was St. Basil.
Basil was born around AD 329 or 330 in Pontus.
Wow.
Now, Pontus is in eastern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. It's rugged country. But Basil, he wasn't just some peasant scratching out a living in the dirt.
No, he was high society.
He came from a high-status, aristocratic Christian family. We were talking about the elite. His father was a rhetorician and an advocate.
So, a lawyer.
Essentially, yes. But in the Roman world, rhetoric was more than just law. It was power. It was how you navigated the world. If you could speak well, if you could argue, you could rule. And Basil was groomed for this. He has the money, he has the status, and he has the education to match.
Where did he go to school?
He starts in Caesarea, then moves to Constantinople, the capital of the East, and finally he goes to Athens.
Athens.
Athens was the Ivy League of the ancient world. Actually, that sells it short. It was Harvard, Oxford, and Hollywood rolled into one. It was the center of intellectual celebrity. You went there to learn how to speak, how to argue, how to be important.
So he spends years there soaking this up. He comes back home in 356 AD, and let's just say the vibe isn't humble servant.
Not even close. The sources, specifically his brother Gregory, say he returned excessively puffed up with the thought of his own eloquence. He despised the local dignitaries.
He despised them.
Yes, he looked down on them because they hadn't been to Athens. They didn't have the polish. He basically thought he was the smartest guy in the room, and he wanted everyone to know it. He was looking at a career in rhetoric, law, public speaking, the path to worldly applause. He was chasing fame.
Enter Macrina.
His elder sister.
The big sister intervention.
It really was. Matrina is the unsung hero of this whole story. She had already committed herself to a life of asceticism, simplicity, prayer, virginity. She is living this focused spiritual life, and she sees her little brother strutting around like a peacock.
I love the phrasing in the source material you highlighted. It says she took him in hand.
It's a great phrase, isn't it? Took him in hand.
It sounds physical. It sounds like she grabbed him by the ear and sat him down.
It implies a forceful correction. This wasn't a gentle suggestion. She drew him toward philosophy, which in this context meant the ascetic life, the dedicated Christian life. She made him see the vanity of worldly applause. She essentially told him, everything you are chasing is smoke. It is going to vanish. You are puffing yourself up with nothing.
This wasn't just a career change for Basil. It was a total ego death initiated by his sibling.
It is humbling, isn't it? You come back from Athens, you're the big shot, you think you have made it, and your sister looks at you and says, you are focusing on all the wrong things. And she was right.
And sadly, tragedy reinforced her point. Around this time, 356 AD, their brother Nacratius died.
This is the turning point. Nacratius was another brother. He was talented, beautiful, athletic, the total package. And he had already embraced a retired, ascetic life. He was living in the woods, taking care of some elderly people, hunting and fishing to feed them.
What happened?
There's a fishing accident in the River Iris. A sudden onrush of water. He was swept away. Gone. Just like that.
That is devastating.
It likely accelerated Basil's retreat. It proved Macrina's point in the most brutal way possible. Worldly success is fleeting, and life is incredibly fragile. You can be the smartest, most eloquent rhetorician in the world, but the river doesn't care.
So Basil bails on the lawyer life. He packs up and retreats. But he doesn't just go to a monastery, he goes to a family estate. I want you to paint the picture for us because Silva's actually went there on a photo expedition, right?
She did. She tracked down the location. It is in the mountainous gorge country near the confluence of the rivers Lycus and Iris.
I'm looking at the description here. A turbulent river, high ridges, completely secluded.
Silvas describes it as a small sloping plain, cut off on all sides except for narrow access by foot at the top of the ridge. The River Iris surrounds it on 3 sides. It is wild. It is loud. It is not a university classroom. This is where the small Asceticon, the basis of the rule we are discussing, was born.
That context is so important. This isn't theoretical ethics written in a comfortable study with a fireplace and a glass of wine. This is written in a gorge by a man who has just realized his fancy education doesn't mean much compared to the raw reality of life and death.
Precisely. He gathers some friends, probably other guys who were disillusioned with the rat race, and they start living there. And they start asking questions. How do we do this? How do we live together without killing each other?
Yeah.
How do we focus on God?
And that brings us to the text itself. Because what we are reading in this deep dive isn't exactly what Basil wrote in that gorge. This is where it gets into the detective story. This is the deep part of the dive.
Right. We're reading the Regula Basili, which is Latin, but Basil spoke Greek. He wrote in Greek.
So Basil wrote a work called the Small Asceticon.
Yes. It was a series of questions and answers. Later, he expanded it into the Great Asceticon. Here is the twist, and it is a big one. The original Greek version of the Small Asceticon is lost.
It just vanished.
It doesn't exist anymore. If we were relying only on the Greek manuscripts, we wouldn't even know this early version existed in this form.
So how do we know what it said? How are we reading it today?
We have 2 main lifelines. One is a Syriac translation called Questions of the Brothers, and the other, the one we are focusing on, is the Latin translation by a man named Rufinus of Aquileia.
Let's talk about Rufinus. He is the bridge between us and Basil. Who is he, and where is he?
Rufinus is a monk living about a generation after Basil. It is AD 397. He is at a place called Pinetum near Terracina, Italy. It is on the coast.
Pinetum literally meaning the pine woods.
Exactly. In his preface, he describes it beautifully. He says, the monastery is washed about on this side, and that by the waves of the shifting and uncertain sea, with pine trees marking the hidden places.
That is so cinematic. You have Basil in a wild river gorge in Turkey, and his translator in a pine forest by the sea in Italy about 30 years after Basil's death.
Both of them are on the edge of the world, in a way.
Yeah.
And Rufinus isn't just translating for fun. He has a market. He sees these monks in Italy who are eager to live the monastic life, but they don't have a guidebook. They're just winging it. So he takes Basil's Greek text and translates it into Latin for them.
But Rufinus isn't exactly a human photocopier, is he? He takes some liberties.
He does, and to his credit, he admits it. He says in his preface that he doesn't translate word for word because that chokes the meaning. He translates sense for sense.
It's like a remix.
It is. He adds what scholars call doublets.
Explain that. What is a doublet?
Well, imagine Basil uses a Greek word that has a really complex, nuanced theological meaning. There isn't a single Latin word that captures it perfectly. So instead of picking one weak word, Rufinus uses two Latin words side by side to capture the full nuance. He expands things to make them clearer for a Latin audience. He is thinking about his readers, monks in Italy, who don't know the context of Cappadocia.
So we have this Latin remix of a lost Greek text. And this is where Anna Silvas comes in with her critical edition. She is looking at the Latin, checking it against the Syriac, and trying to figure out what Basil actually said versus what Rufinus added. And there is some serious academic drama here.
There is. Silvas discusses the conflict between two scholars, Klaus Zeltzer and Sven Lundström.
Zeltzer versus Lundström, the heavyweight bout of Latin textual criticism.
It sounds obscure, I know.
Yeah.
But the stakes are high for accuracy. Zeltzer published a critical edition in 1986, but Lundström challenged it, arguing that Zeltzer messed up the stemma.
The stemma, is that like a stem cell?
Think of it like a family tree. When you have dozens of handwritten copies of a manuscript from different centuries, none of them are the original. They are copies of copies. You have to figure out which one is the parent of the others to trace back to the source. If you get the family tree, the stemma, wrong, you might trust a manuscript that is actually full of errors. Lundström argued Zeltzer got the lineage wrong.
My favorite example of this detective work is the grape controversy.
Ah, yes. Isaiah 5.4.
Tell us about the grapes. This is the kind of detail I live for.
So, in a citation of the prophet Isaiah within the rule, the Latin manuscripts vary. Some say uva, singular, grape. Others say uvas, plural, grapes.
One letter difference, an S.
But a world of difference for a textual critic. Lundström argued for the singular uva.
Why?
Because he went back to the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament that Basil would have used. In the Greek, the word is staphyle, which is a singular collective noun. So Lundström argued Basil would have thought in the singular, so the Latin should reflect that.
So even if the Latin manuscripts are messy, looking at the Greek Bible helps solve the puzzle.
Exactly. But then you check the Syriac version, and it uses the plural.
Of course it does, just to make it complicated.
It shows you how hard it is to get to the absolute truth. Scholars fight over a single letter to try and reconstruct the mind of Basil. It is not just reading, it is excavation.
And there is the genitive debate too, right? How to spell Basil's name in Latin.
Right. Zeltzer used Basili, with one I. He thought it sounded more classical, like Cicero. He wanted it to look like Golden Age Latin. But Silvas uses Basili, with two I's. She consulted experts who said that by the time of Rufinus, the double I was standard. So she changes the title to match the actual era of the translator.
It is these tiny details that make you realize we aren't just reading a book, we are reading a reconstruction. We're looking through layers of history, Basil's voice, Rufinus's translation, the scribes who made typos, and the modern scholars trying to fix them.
It adds a richness to the text. It is alive. It has scars.
Okay, let's get into the text itself. We have done the detective work. We're sitting in the gorge with Basil. We start with the prologue. And right away, the vibe is intense.
It is. Basil sets the scene. It is night. He mentions they are gathered while having some small silence from the crowds. They're spending the remnant of the night in inquiry.
That sets such a specific mood. It is a vigil. If you are a learner listening to this, you can probably relate to that feeling of late-night study, trying to figure something out when the world is finally quiet.
But Basil warns them. This isn't a casual chat. He warns them not to be indifferent.
The stakes are high.
Extremely high.
Wow.
He quotes the gospel. The word spoken will judge them on the last day. And he brings up the servant who knew the master's will and didn't do it.
Many blows.
Yes, Luke 12. Knowing the right thing and not doing it results in a harsher punishment than ignorance. Basil is saying, if you ask me these questions and I give you the answers, You are now responsible for that knowledge. You can't claim ignorance anymore.
It turns the Q&A into a contract. It is not knowledge for knowledge's sake. It is knowledge for action.
Precisely.
So the first question they ask him, it is about the order of operations. Is there a sequence to the commandments? Or is it a circle where you can jump in anyway?
It is a logical question. There are so many rules in the Bible. Where do you start? Do you start with thou shalt not kill? Do you start with dietary laws?
And Basil says, yes, there is an order.
First, love God with all your heart and mind. Second, love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay, standard Christian answer, Matthew 22. But then they ask question 2, how? How do we love God? And this is where Basil gets fascinating. He doesn't just quote a Bible verse and leave it at that.
No, he makes a natural argument. He argues that love is not a foreign imposition. It is implanted in us.
Implanted, like hardware, like an operating system.
Exactly. He uses analogies. We naturally love light. We naturally love our parents. Nobody has to teach a baby to enjoy the sunshine or to cling to its mother. It is instinct. Basil argues that God is the ultimate good. Since we are hardwired to love the good, loving God should actually be the most natural thing in the world.
So sin, or not loving God, is actually unnatural.
In Basil's view, yes. It is a malfunction. It is going against your own grain.
He gets very poetic here. This is where the puffed-up rhetorician from Athens actually puts his skills to good use.
He does. He describes God's beauty as ineffable light. He says that lightning, the morning star, the moon, the sun, all of them are darkness compared to God's glory.
It is beautiful. But then he drops this incredible analogy about how to keep this love, the blacksmith.
The smith analogy. This is one of my favorite parts of the rule for its practicality. It is a mental hack.
Walk us through it.
Basil asks, how does a blacksmith make a tool, say an axe or a scythe? He doesn't just heat up metal and bang on it randomly. He always keeps the person who ordered the axe in his mind.
The customer.
Right. If he forgets the customer's request, the size, the shape, the purpose, he makes the wrong tool. He wastes his time, he makes a piece of junk.
So the memory of the commander dictates the shape of the work.
Exactly. Basil applies this to everything. Eating, drinking, working. Every action must be directed by the memory of the customer, which is God. If you lose that memory, your work, your life loses its proper shape.
It is a mindfulness hack from the 4th century. You aren't just doing dishes, you are doing dishes with a specific customer in mind.
And that memory is what keeps you on track. If you forget who you were working for, you start working for yourself, or for applause, or for money. And the tool gets warped. Your life gets warped.
I love that. It turns the mundane into something meaningful. Okay, moving to question 3. This is the big one. This is the killer app of Basil's community.
The question of solitude versus community.
The listener asks, should I live alone? Should I be a hermit? Or should I live with brothers?
Now, you have to understand the context. In the 4th century, the hermit was the rock star of Christianity. The desert fathers in Egypt, St. Anthony, going out into the desert alone to fight demons was considered the height of spirituality. They were the Navy SEALs of the faith.
The ultimate tough guy move. I don't need anyone. Just me and God.
Yes, and Basil looks at that and says, no, that is a bad idea.
He is aggressively pro-community.
Aggressively. He dismantles the solitary life with 3 main arguments.
Argument number 1, human nature.
Man is a domesticated and sociable animal, not one savage and wild.
Again, with the nature argument, we aren't built to be lone wolves.
We have physical needs. We can't provide food, clothing, and shelter entirely on our own. We need each other just to survive. If you are alone, you spend 90% of your time just trying not to starve. That is not spiritual. That is just survival.
Argument number 2, the body metaphor.
This comes from St. Paul, but Basil sharpens it. A foot has power, right? It can walk. But if you cut the foot off the leg, it is useless. It can't walk anywhere.
And he applies this to spiritual gifts.
Right. If you have the gift of wisdom and I have the gift of prophecy and we live in separate caves, my prophecy doesn't help you and your wisdom doesn't help me. We bury our gifts. We rob each other.
But argument number 3 is the one that really lands. The feedback loop.
This is pure psychology.
Yeah.
Basil realizes that if you live alone, you have no one to criticize you.
You think you are perfect.
Exactly. He quotes Ecclesiastes. Woe to one alone, for if he falls, there is none else to raise him up. But it is deeper than that. He says the solitary person thinks they have achieved the height of virtue because there's no one around to annoy them.
It is easy to be patient when there is no one interrupting you. It is easy to be humble when there is no one insulting you.
And that leads to the mic drop moment. Basil asks the solitary monk, whose feet will you wash?
Ooh, that hits hard.
He is referencing Jesus washing the disciples' feet. It is the ultimate act of servanthood. Basil asks, in comparison with whom shall you be lower or even the last if you live by yourself?
That is such a devastating critique. You cannot practice humility in a vacuum. You need people. You need people to annoy you, to inconvenience you, to need you.
Basil is saying that holiness isn't a solo sport. It is a team sport. And if you remove yourself from the team, you aren't winning. You are forfeiting. You are delusional about your own state of soul.
It changes the whole idea of community. Community isn't just about support or having a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is about friction. The friction is the point. The friction polishes you.
That is a perfect way to put it. The friction is the refining fire. Without it, you stay rough.
So say you are listening to this and you are convinced. You want to join Basil's community. You want to leave the gorge of your ego and enter the gorge of community. How do you do it? This brings us to the practical logistics in questions 4, 5, and 6.
First, renunciation. Question 4.
It is not just giving up your Xbox.
No. Basil talks about renouncing former habits, own ways, and even bodily kinship.
He redefines family.
He does. He says true parents are those who begot him in Christ. This was radical in an aristocratic society where family lineage was everything. Your name was your currency. Basil is saying your bloodline doesn't matter here. Your spiritual lineage does. You have to be willing to cut the cord.
And then there's the money. Question 5, property management.
This is very specific. Basil warns against just dumping your possessions indifferently to your relatives.
You can't just say, here, take my estate, I'm out.
No. Basil argues that once you decide to dedicate yourself to God, your property is technically consecrated. It belongs to the temple, so to speak.
So mismanaging it is...
Sacrilege.
Wow. That puts a lot of pressure on the exit strategy.
If you give your money to relatives who are just going to waste it on luxury, you are misusing God's funds. You must dispose of them reasonably to the poor or the church. It is not just about getting rid of it. It is about deploying it correctly.
That is a fascinating nuance. It is not just poverty, it is stewardship.
Exactly.
Finally, recruitment. Question 6. Can anyone join? Can I just walk in off the street?
Well, Basil struggles with this. On one hand, Jesus says, come to me all. So you can't arbitrarily reject people.
The open door policy.
But on the other hand, Basil says one doesn't enter holy doctrine with muddy feet.
The nutty feet. I love that image.
He implies a testing period. You have to investigate their past life.
Background check.
And a physical test. Can they bear bodily labor?
Basil's monks worked. They weren't just praying, they were farming, building.
And a psychological test. Are they willing to confess sins without shame? And this is the big one. Will they accept menial and abject crafts without complaining?
So if you were a lawyer in your past life, are you willing to clean the latrines?
That is the test. It establishes the novitiate, the probationary period. It protects the community from tourists, people who like the idea of the ascetic life but don't want to do the washing up.
It makes sense. If you are building a community based on humility and service, you need to filter out the egos at the door.
Especially since Basil himself had to filter out his own ego. He knows how dangerous that puffed-up state is. He knows the damage a narcissist can do to a community.
That brings us full circle. We started with a man puffed up with rhetoric, and we end with a rule designed to crush that puffiness through service to others.
It is a remarkable journey.
So, synthesizing this deep dive, the Regula Bacilli isn't just a rule book, it is a constitution of connectivity.
That is a great term for it. It moves from the internal, the love of God, to the external community, and finally to the practical, renunciation and work. It connects everything.
And the legacy.
It's set on the shelf of St. Benedict. When Benedict wrote his rule, which governed Europe for 1,000 years, he was looking at Basil's text. He calls him Holy Father Basil. Basil shaped the DNA of Western civilization's approach to work, study, and community living.
It is amazing to think that a text written in a wild gorge in Turkey, translated by a guy in a pine forest in Italy, essentially architected the way monks lived in England and France for centuries.
Shows the power of a good idea. The idea that we are better together.
And that leads me to our final provocative thought for you, the listener.
Go on.
Basil argues that living alone makes you delusional about your own virtue because you never face conflict. You never have to wash anyone's feet.
Yes.
In our modern age, we don't live in caves, but we have digital isolation. We have curated lives on social media. We can block people who annoy us. We can unfollow people who disagree with us. We create a digital hermitage where we are always right, always virtuous, and never challenged.
That is a chilling parallel. We are becoming the solitary monks Basil warned against. We are creating echo chambers where we think we are perfect.
Exactly. We think we are perfect because we never have to deal with the messy reality of other people. So, the question Basil asks is more relevant than ever. In your curated digital life, whose feet are you washing?
That is a question worth sitting with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the rule of St. Basil. We will see you next time.